Okay, good morning, everyone. I'm Brian Smith, Chair of the TCH's Board's Governance, Communication, and Human Resources Committee. I apologize for the delay, but working with technology in the current environment is always challenging, and we want to make sure that everybody can connect with the committee. So welcome to the public session of today's committee meeting. In light of the need for social distancing to limit the spread of COVID-19, we are holding this committee meeting online. I first of all would like to recognize and acknowledge the land that we meet on and our building is located in. Let me begin with the acknowledgement that the land each of us is on as we hold this virtual meeting is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. We are conducting this virtual meeting using...
Mr. Chair, sorry, could everybody that's not speaking mute, please? It's too much background noise. I can hardly hear you, Brian.
Okay. So if people can put theirs on, or if Sonia, you can mute everybody but me, that would be great. We are conducting this virtual meeting using an online platform which provides for continued effective governance and decision-making. None of the committee members are in the same room because we are continuing to practice physical distancing to limit the spread of COVID-19. During the public session, we will consider a single item related to tenant engagement system refresh. Let me explain some of the special procedures that we propose to follow during today's meeting. Members of the public are able to follow along with today's meeting virtually via the live stream on our YouTube channel. Welcome to those tuning in through the YouTube. Welcome to you today. We continue to value the input of members of the public to the matters that form part of our committee's agenda, and will be hearing live deputations at today's meeting. Members of the public wanting to depute to an agenda item on today's agenda had the option to do so by either, one, submitting a written deputation, which were circulated to committee members, or secondly, being teleconferenced into today's meeting to orally depute a committee to committee members. Also, a number of individuals sent in video deputations. All deputation submissions will be made public after today's meeting is held. Oral deputations will be of the audio video record of the meeting that TCHC will stream through the YouTube channel. Written deputations will be posted with the meeting minutes. I would request that any committee members who wish to either question staff in relation to a matter on today's agenda use the chat function within the WebEx application to signal to the board secretary that you want to do so. Governance staff will manage a speakers list and a list of committee members who want to question the staff. In keeping with the practice adopted by the City of Toronto, we will, in the absence of a request from a committee member, conduct votes by way of a show of hands. To assist in this process, we would ask all committee members to ensure that their cameras are on and request staff participating in the meeting to ensure that their cameras are turned off during the voting process. Should a committee member request that we do so, we will vote on items as required using a voice vote, in which I will ask committee members individually to indicate whether they either support or oppose the recommendation that is before the committee by indicated whether they approve or oppose the recommendation. Before we begin the meeting, I would like to reiterate the board's support for TCHC's frontline staff who are in our buildings, offices, communities across the city, working under challenging conditions to provide essential services and needed supports to tenants, as well as our employees who continue to work from their home to keep the business running. Toronto Community Housing is doing its part to support the city's efforts to protect public health and limit the spread of COVID-19. On behalf of the board, I would like to thank everyone at the company for stepping up during these extraordinarily difficult times. Thank you for all your efforts and for living our values of putting tenants first. And now we can start with the agenda, and I will now review the public consent agenda items and public regular agendas items as listed on the agenda. The item 2A, approval of the public meeting agenda, and item 3, the tenant engagement update request. Are there any further business that needs to be added to the agenda? Hearing none, then I ask for someone to move the agenda.
Agenda, Councillor Fletcher.
Thank you. Seconder, John?
Second.
Thank you. Would members of the Governance and Communications and Human Resource Committee please indicate any agenda item in which they have a conflict of interest together with the nature of the conflict? Are there any conflicts? No conflicts of interest were declared for any of the agenda items. I think I've approved the agenda already, so. The board secretary will now request that members of the committee express either their approval or opposition to today's meeting agenda by following hands. I think we've already got your approval on that.
Approve.
Okay, so we do have, I'd like to note regrets, I believe, from Debbie Douglas today, and we're still waiting, hopefully, that Uba Farah may join us at some point during the meeting. The tenant engagement update. I'm now going to ask Sheila Penny to present her report and answer any questions.
So, Mr. Chair, I'm going to suggest that we before Ms. Penny makes her presentation to the board, that we hear from the deputants who've provided us with comments or wish to do so by phoning into the meeting. I'll note for the record that we've received a number of written deputations from 17 individuals, including Ayans Youssef, Carmen Rayner, Christina Luta, Denise Bishop Earl, Dawn Warden, Faye Stanley, Gerald Schemerhorn, Jody Swindell, Kwame Anane Frempong, Lori Grant, Lise Gervais, Lorna Colquhoun, Mabel Ernest, Paul Hall, Robert Rayner, Sagal Duale, and Zamani Ra, and we will post the written submissions that they have provided to us with this meeting at the conclusion of the meeting. We have also, in preparation for this meeting, received a number of video deputations from members of the TCHC community. We've got that video lined up and ready to share with members of the committee. It includes roughly 10 deputations. It's about 40 minutes long. We would propose to share that with you now, and I'm just noting the time of the video for individuals who've indicated that they want to participate in the meeting by phoning in and providing their deputation. We would propose to hear those deputations once we've completed the video. So Kaylee, I believe Kaylee Wilson has the video lined up, and if she can share that with the committee at this time.
Sorry, I just want to be clear, Mr. Chair. Do we have a policy on video? Do we have a policy on video deputations? I'm sorry.
I'm not aware of it, but Dara.
So, a deputation to me is the same as, it's great to have, but it's for the record. You can't ask questions of somebody who's sent a letter, and you can't ask questions of somebody who's got a video deputation. So I for sure would like to hear those who are on the line. I'm happy to look at this. Are we only getting this today?
Yeah, I don't think we received the video ones, and I'm not sure when they were received by TCC.
Yep. I appreciate all of that, and I appreciate the fact that somebody has filmed all of this and put it together. I don't know who, and I think the board should see all of the videos. I'm just not sure it's the same as having somebody that you can question. So I don't know who made the decision that a video deputation is a different status than a letter. I'd like to know.
So we, through the chair, in preparation for this meeting, we sought to see what steps we could take in order to facilitate tenant contributions and with respect to their views in relation to this issue. Tenant engagement staff, along with strategic communications staff, put together a video of comments from tenants in the community in order to provide to the committee those views in conjunction with its consideration of this matter. The video was distributed to committee members yesterday as soon as it was prepared. It was only finalized late in the day yesterday afternoon. We can share it with the committee now. We've provided committee members with the link to the video with that communication yesterday. We can post it to the website after the meeting in the same way that we've dealt with written deputations. This was an effort by us to provide additional access to the committee process to individuals who might not otherwise be able to participate live today. We're in the committee's hands as to whether or not the committee wants to view the video at this time or move directly into the phone deputations, and we'll post it to the website following. We do not at present have a specific policy that addresses video deputations.
So
okay, I didn't see Dara, but maybe where that actually came in yesterday, the videos. But anyway,
I'm going to move that we treat this, because I'm just still asking questions, that the staff and corporate communications had this video made. Is that correct?
We compiled the videos that we received, Councillor.
Oh, and did people...
Sorry, we compiled the videos we'd received into a single stream so that you could, rather than launching 9 or 10 videos, you could just launch the one. Yeah.
So that's fine. I think that's great. I'm happy. I think this is the governance committee. We don't have a policy on that. So I feel like if I'm seeing a video, I need, or if I have a deputation, I need to be able to ask a question. And I think it's great that we have these and all the written deputations, but I don't think that we would be playing that here. People are waiting online to speak, and I'd much prefer to proceed with people that are lined up as deputants today, and have this to view and be able to ask the staff any questions at the board that may have any further follow-up questions to these deputants. I would do with any written deputations. Take that under advisement.
Well, as Sarah mentioned, we are at your disposal, whichever way the committee would proceed.
Oh, I understand.
Let's move ahead with those who wish to make deputations via phone in. And we will see how our time is towards the end to review all the video presentations. But let's move ahead and try and I don't know how
we reach out to.
So we're going to give us a second, and we'll connect with the phone and deputants.
Is Danielle arranging that?
Sonia is calling the first. It's Kathy Birch, I think, is our first deputy.
Okay.
Sonia will reach out to her.
There we go. Hi, guys. I have Kathy ready on the line.
Good morning.
Good morning,
Is
Kathy.
everybody ready?
Yeah, I'm ready. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can the group hear us?
We can hear you.
Okay, excellent.
Can
So
we
if you're ready.
everything else on mute so that we don't get the background noise? Thank you.
Okay, so if everyone's ready, Kathy?
Good morning, Mr. Chair and committee members. I'm here to talk to you about the refresh. This has been an extremely long process to get through for tenants and management since the mayor's task force report. We've all endured several things that have caused a brutal process that included multiple changes in boards, executives, and staff. What seemed like constant changing of direction of the ship by constant executive changes is basically the root of the extensive delays, and that the constant turnover was, at the board's hands. Yes, at one point I went along with others, and we even asked our board to instruct management to honor the direction originally outlined to us as tenants after the task force report, which was that our communities would be able to pick the model that best suited our communities. Then as the changes went along, and Ms. Milsom became CEO, she took those options away from us, the tenants. Luckily, when we came to the board and said, look, you need to honor that original commitment, the board agreed, and the then acting CEO, Sheila Penny, had the good sense to meet with several of the tenants to straighten the issue out. Making that change involved redirecting staff, redirecting communications, and most importantly, informing us, the tenants, that our request meant changes in what those changes were. Meanwhile, while all those changes were going on, tenant reps were stepping down in communities out of the constant upheaval. And granted, some of them left for personal reasons. No by-elections for those communities were being held because we were going through the change. So those spaces ended up empty for quite a long time because we went through extensions of our tenant reps during that time. But then you ended up with a lot of blank spaces. And that really contributed to killing the engagement a lot. And it made it hard for the tenants. No, the tenants didn't know who to go to in their own communities. But in saying that, for us as tenants to come to the board and for the board to honor that original commitment was the right thing to do. As it stands right now, from what I've seen from the reports, now over 80 communities have decided they wanted to stay with the old tenant rep model, and many went with the new committee model, and we already had existing tenant associations, and some communities just said, you know what, we don't want to participate at all. As we've gone through that part of the process, some of the engagement in our communities was minimal. And just like in any kind of democratic voting process, you can bring as much information as you want. You can go door to door. You can talk to people in person. But that doesn't guarantee that when it's time to vote, they're going to vote. You can't make tenants be involved. It's just not possible any more than, you know, for a federal election, you can bring as much information as you want up. But if people don't go to the polls and they don't vote, you can't make them. I just want to make sure that this group understands that we need to get on with this process. We need to get engagement in place. We need to make sure that that shareholders agreement is lived up to, that we are maintaining engagement with tenants and the voices are being heard. We have to stop the extreme backtracking. Because of the COVID-19, everything came to a dead stop, as we all know. And now to get this restarted, management and staff are going to have to come back out to the communities, refresh everybody's memories of where that community stood, whether they picked a committee, and where each community is in place, and get to the next step of the voting process. So if we don't keep this process moving, this could drag on forever and ever and ever, and it's already been 4 or 5 years in the making. That's enough. We're tired of it as tenants. Our neighbors, we don't know who to go to. We're going through a corporate reorg at the same time, and it's chaos. You need to do what's right by us, the tenants, and get our representation in place. Now, that's what I say to you as, pardon me, as a tenant. As chair of the RPAS committee, I want to assure everybody in this committee and at our board that we are monitoring the accessibility issues such as multiple languages. How are we going to make sure that printed materials are available in different languages? How are we going to do the voting process so that all accessibility issues are taken care of? The RPAS committee is deeply involved in that. We are working with communications. We are working with Sheila Penny and Julio, and to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to participate. And with that, I'm going to say thank you.
Thank you very much, Kathy. Are there any questions?
Yes, I do have a question. It's Councillor Fletcher.
Good morning, Councillor.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm good.
Hope you're staying safe and well during this time.
I am.
Thank you. I just noted that you indicated that the staff would have to go out and refresh some of the memories before the first steps were taken, because it was a while ago that some people voted on which model, and maybe they've moved, whatever. That I heard you say that. Do you think that's
true.
Sorry. I thought my video was on, because I want to actually see you. There we go. So that's true. Now we have a new model, as you know, and I'll be asking Ms. Penny about that, or Mr. Marchman later. But our new model, 3 areas of the city, hub model, reorged for total good buildings, and you're well aware of that, I know.
Yes, I am.
So it does make sense to me what you said, to go out and do that. But in particular, there's staff that have been put in place with every hub that would be engaged with tenants, right? The tenants coordinators, plus those who would do tenant engagement. You're aware of that, are you?
I am.
So would it make sense to you for that refresh to take place in those communities for those people who are now in the new organization and the new reorg to go out and spread the good word about tenant engagement, the elections, and everything else? So shifting to the people that will be in those communities permanently to take on this role of what you call reminding people what went, what's gone on this file. Does that make sense?
Well, I think what's going to happen, and I haven't done this detailed questioning, but it would make sense to me, and I'm sure this is part of Sheila's plan, is the people that are now maybe new to a community as a CSC, and that they will be the ones that are helping to refresh the community's, the tenants' memories as to what they chose previous to COVID, and making sure that then from, if it's in a committee model, that they will refresh the memories, then those, and give them the next steps of the committee members will then nominate who they want to be the tenant reps at the action tables. So I think automatically that puts the new people that are in those CSC positions dealing with the committees or the tenant reps, depending on which model the committee took, right, or which the community took. I think that will put faces to voice to committees, and there was a lot of changing of CSCs prior to the elections and to that, and it was like changing every month, it seemed like. Now they've kind of settled them down and gotten them in. They know which community they're going to be working with. So it's important for those committees and tenant reps that are going through this process to put that face and that name to that. And this is the opportunity that you get to mesh the reorg with the engagement. So I think it'll work.
Thank you very much for that answer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Kathy. Or Sonia, who's controlling the deputations. We still have the time limit for each speaker. Is that correct? Are you doing that, John?
I am, and Ms. Birch's deputation wrapped up just around the 5 minutes mark.
Okay.
Here, I'll share the timer for future deputants.
Okay, thank you. So would you put the second deputant on, please?
Isaac Ahmed is the next deputant in line.
Hi, good morning all. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Well, first I want to say thank you for having me and the opportunity to speak amongst the committee.
We don't know who the deputy is. Sorry to interrupt. We don't know who you are. Could you, Mr. Chair, could you please have our deputant let us know who he is and stop his time? Thank you.
I've stopped the time. This is Isaac Ahmed.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, my name is Isaac Ahmed. Thank you for the opportunity to speak months board. I'm a resident of a community called Susan, which is in the Scarborough area, located near Kingston, Galloway, Oran Park space. Hopefully you're all familiar with that area. So I'm speaking here with regard to my own personal experience around tenant participation and leadership, in which the CSC staff in my community has really done a great job over the years. I've been doing a lot of grassroots work for the past 5-6 years, and my staff here has really been keeping active within our spaces and amongst our residents, even with the heavy workload that he has in the various communities that he operates in. As a grassroots leader, I often organize events for our community, and a lot of that has been able to get done because of the aid of my CSC staff. Usually, if I have an idea, I'd go ahead and I'll just shoot an email to my staff, and then he helps me to mobilize whatever resources that he has, and then from then on, things get done. Or he usually would send me a text or an email, and from that point, he introduces me to resources that are available within the community. So essentially, we don't really have a formal system in our neighborhood. It's mainly our staff our CSC staff that's really active, and providing and showing the different partnerships within the community here. So really a big reason why I'm able to do all of my grassroots work is because of my CSC staff, and this includes whether we have an annual barbecue, whether we have our community potlucks. We even had a movie night, in which was really great because it allows us as residents to still have initiatives, and we don't have to spend out of our pocket to really build the community. This also includes being associated with Park People and their Sparking Change funds, in which we received a grant to fund several community events in our space. We've also been introduced to the Nike basketball camps in association with TCAC, which occurred on Saturday mornings, and allowed our youth to go to the Ryerson University Mathery Athletic Center. In addition, I've also worked diligently and worked really hard for the Pole 2 Project Fund, which is provided by the City of Toronto, and it helps us to renovate the community infrastructure in TCHC space, which is great that we've been awarded this, and construction will start maybe within the next year or so, hopefully. We've also had the honor of having a mural project on the side wall of our building, which is in collaboration with the Boys and Girls Club, TCAC, and Street Art Toronto, to have a piece of art that really represents our community and some really common significant themes that we have here. One of our latest projects here is with OCAD University in collaboration with TCAC, which really allowed me to utilize my own experience as a resident to advise, how we would want our community to look. And this involves completely restructuring the outdoor infrastructure of our community to really serve our own needs. Also, being involved in the Youth Violence Prevention Act, in which CSC worked directly with myself and the manager for Scarborough Center for Healthy Communities on bringing programming to our community. And if we do get this grant, it will offer $600,000 in funds over 3 years to give youth a safe space to learn and grow. But the most important initiative I would say I've been involved in is a community-led film project documentary, which aims to paint a positive light on our community, which has often been plagued by various obstacles and barriers for a strong and healthy livelihood. We hope to have this screen sometime within the next few months within the community. And my team has also had the honor of being interviewed within the TCAC Tenant Loop magazine, as well as the November issue of the Scarborough Mirror. But most recently, we've had a connection with 5 and 2 Kitchens, where they provide us with free lunch and groceries twice a week. So, to end, I would say that as a Black male who's resided in the community for a long period of time, I've been grateful to have been a part of many community initiatives, which really has been guided with our CSE staff.
Thank you very much, Isaac. Are there any questions for Isaac? Hearing no questions, again, thank you very much for your input. It sounds like there's a lot of involvement in your community, and thank you for your participation and engagement in making your community a better community. Could you put on the next deputant, please?
The next deputant is Dahlia Advocacy.
Yes, good morning. My name is Dahlia Advocacy. I am a community activist having practical knowledge of the community I serve and streaming from an educational background in both social work and politics. I would like to speak on community engagement. In the East Galloway community, programs for all ages are being negotiated, targeting all ages from youth to seniors. TCHC staff works effectively with community members to demonstrate interest in participation in community meetings. These community meetings have unified tenants who would otherwise not know each other. This has inadvertently served to assist tenants with resources such as childcare, dietary support, health and wellness, and general information, which has also been extended to the surrounding community. This also facilitates a place where members of the TDSB and public health representatives are able to support the community and become familiar with tenants on a first name basis. This process is inclusive to all tenants, ages, gender, moral, and religious backgrounds, with access to translators upon request. Majority of the tenant population do not choose to participate in tenant meetings, which directly impacts community engagement. The feedback I personally receive, being on the front line, is that tenants feel that their requests regarding issues such as safety and maintenance have fallen on, quote, deaf ears. As it pertains to affordability, tenants who are privy to the guidelines regarding increase of income as it relates to RGI also face challenges surrounding the fear of advancement. In this case, once a tenant increases their employment income for a consecutive 12 months, they will automatically lose their rent geared to income status. According to tenants who have grown accustomed to the RGI system acting as, quote, a safety blanket for their housing needs, it then becomes very challenging to accept positions which move tenants into a higher income bracket, thus forcing them off RGI into a fixed pool of market rental recipients. Many have in fact rejected opportunities for advancement, especially those with familial changes like single parenthood, issues with mental health, disabilities, those caring for seniors, individuals with criminal records, and various other factors. This can assist in the debilitation of the tenant's self-esteem, thus becoming stagnant and settling for a path of mediocrity, resulting in the failure to thrive and become an efficient member of society, which directly impacts tenant desires to participate in community engagement. My suggestion is to consider the revision of the 12-month policy as it relates to removing tenants from the RGI program. Thank you very much. Have a nice day.
Thank you very much, Dahlia. Are there any questions from committee members?
Yes, Mr. Chair, it's Councillor Fletcher. Good morning, Dahlia.
Good morning.
There is you mentioned about safety and maintenance in the buildings or in your community as being something that had not yet been, that you didn't feel satisfied with. Now, there's the new model that we've just put together with the general manager in the east and then cascading down to local community management and tenant coordinators, community action coordinators. Do you think that model will assist with the safety and maintenance issues in your community, or have you seen that model be effective yet for you and your fellow tenants?
I personally feel that the needs of the tenants, based on what I'm hearing, is they feel that there are things that are known to TCHC that they are not addressing and they're overlooking for possibly their own personal safety. For example, Dell Management runs this community and they're the ones who are on site. So if there is a unit that is involved in, drug trafficking, for example, and maybe 43 Division has already entered the unit on more than one occasion, we find that shortly after the tenants are there and they're not being removed from these units. So you bring in a lot of community members who are coming to be a part of engaging in that trafficking and so forth. So this issue is ongoing. We have issues with lack of security. And if we do have a security guard, as there was a death 2 years ago, the security was on site while the person was being murdered in the hallway, but the security was a 5'5" girl, 120 pounds. She locked herself into the janitorial closet because at the end of the day, she also has to think about her safety. So there's different issues that really go deeper and need to be looked into when it comes to safety. And this in general is affecting community engagement because people are saying that no matter what, they feel that these issues are not going to improve, and they likewise do not decide to participate in the process.
So you're from a contract managed community. Would you look forward to a day when you'd be managed directly by Toronto Community Housing?
Absolutely. That is our greatest hope at this point.
That's your greatest hope. Well, I've certainly taken note of that. Thank you. It's my greatest hope for you as well. Thank you so much for today. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Dahlia, I have a question. What more could TCHC do to increase community development in your community beyond the refresh? Are there other recommendations? Or I realize the safety and maintenance issues are very important issues, but to engage people in building community, are there suggestions you would have in other things that TCHC could do to improve or basically have people involved in building their own community?
Yes, definitely. My first suggestion would be to potentially employ, whether it be voluntary or for income, individuals who are active members of the community, who are involved on their own merits to find out what the community needs, who are actually personally involved with these individuals. It's not just at a work capacity, because there's a level of power that people who are in the community feel they cannot express themselves to individuals who are on staff. So when you are not on the staff and you can speak openly and you're at the playgrounds and you're interacting, they feel like they can speak to you even whether they speak English or not, or they have to translate. They feel comfortable knowing that whatever barriers they face with fearing to lose their unit if they say the wrong thing or if they attack the management, they are concerned with what will happen to them or what will become of them. So it's good to have people who are not a threat and do not have a level of power over them, and having them share what the community is thinking. Also, another suggestion that was brought up was when TCHC is housing individuals, I know that there is a priority list, that there's a certain priority that's given to different individuals who are homeless, under 16, a certain age or minor, or either mental health. The recommendation is that when you have a building that is specifically families and children, that you are mindful when giving units to individuals specifically who are suffering addictions and mental health, because the community has now been infiltrated with that, and the things that the children are observing on a daily basis, just trying to go about their lives, has now become an issue that is causing mental health on these youth. So we are seeing things that are obscene, and without getting into too much detail, there needs to be more consideration to what mix of individuals you're putting in what location. We're not trying to discriminate, but it is imperative that we look at this issue.
So you would suggest then that, as we know, there are individuals who need supportive housing. They need other resources beyond simply a decent and affordable place to live. They need other supports, whether it be mental health or other kinds of resources provided. So it's another level that you're suggesting we need to ensure if people are moving in who require those additional resources, they actually are there to provide to those individuals who need more supports.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you very much. John, you have a question?
Yeah, to the deputy. Is it your experience that in the past people have been happy with the level of tenant engagement? It's sort of a two-part question. Have they been happy with the level of tenant engagement, and have they been happy with the degree to which they're been represented by someone, a resident of their building? Have they been happy with representation, and in general, have they been satisfied with tenant engagement?
I feel that for majority of the tenants, they are not happy with tenant engagement. I feel that most tenants who come out to these meetings have formed a type of unit where they're almost friends, and then other individuals who may have language barriers or they come from a different multicultural background feel that they're, even though they're present, they feel like they're isolated. So unfortunately, one group begins to run the whole system, and then the rest are kind of left out. And then that doesn't make them take an interest in participation. So I can't say I'm happy or the tenants are happy with the process, but yet the staff who are on site are making an effort. They do a lot. They try to provide activities, and they engage the community with food and make it a little bit more, fun and engaging. So I can see the staff trying to do their job, but still there is more ideas that could be brought to the table that could make this process more cohesive.
Do you think that tenant reps are in place for the right period of time, or is it too long, or is it not long enough?
I believe that a committee works better than the tenant rep. I find that the tenant reps that were here in the past, the community ended up kind of shying away from their advice, and also once they had a conflict with that individual, now they have no one to go to. Whereas when there was when a committee is working, I find that people feel more comfortable to be a part of the process. The tenant rep often starts to feel as though they have a level of power, and they accept suggestions from individuals who they personally appreciate rather than individuals who they're not agreeing with.
I understand that. How long have you lived in Toronto Community Housing?
I lived in Toronto Community Housing in the Galloway area for 8 years. I've lived prior to that since I was 25 years, from Lawrence Heights to Mornell to Jane and Finch Community to Galloway. I have tons of experience and tons of friends who also work for TCHC who have knowledge in this area.
Okay, and sorry, what's your first name?
Dahlia. I go by Dahlia Advocacy.
Oh, because I got the word, I got the advocacy part, right. Okay, Dahlia, very good. All right. Thank you very much. Appreciate your deputation today.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Dahlia, for your input. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
Could you put the next deputant in, please, Dara?
Yes, the next deputant is Alicia Griffin.
Hi, I'm again Alicia Griffith. I have over 10 to 15 years of community work. I lived in housing my entire life. Now I'm an advocate for the Palmer Court Wakanda community. You guys call it O'Connor Drive. For the tenant engagement system refresh, we had our vote. So our community as a whole is 2 different groups. It's 5 Wakanda and then 90 in the townhouses are group. So I'm speaking on behalf of the townhouses or my experience with the townhouse and 90, because now we're joined together again. Before we were separate. We voted for committee. I strongly support that because a committee is the most fairest way. It diffuses power, the word gets to spread more. Anytime there's issues with one person, somebody could always approach somebody else. It's just, I can go on and on about how a committee is the best choice, especially for a community like ours. It's very hard to outreach to townhouses because you have to go door to door. And the staff or the supervisors voting day, they actually did go door to door for the townhouses. And there was a very good turnout for the townhouses because normally it's hard getting them out, especially the faith loss in housing. Because since I remember being a little girl, there has been so much different refreshed systems that people just end up giving up because a year from now, a shift can happen in housing and all of a sudden this model gets thrown out the door and another one comes in. So it's very difficult for people to commit to something that's never concrete or permanent or so short-lived that nothing actually gets done. You spend all this time in meetings and you can't see a change because something new pops up. We haven't really had any meetings. Like we did have the first meeting for anybody who wanted to join the committee, and then everything got halted after that. So we didn't really get a chance to meet. But we started a community organization outside of TCHC to try to get things done faster, involve the community more because we were more involved in the community. So it was easier for us to get together as a group and create something and help the community in that way. I think that this can potentially be the tenant engagement system refresh can be a very good thing if it's actually followed through. Because the way I read it or way I articulated it is that it would give the tenants more autonomy and that they're able to make decisions that will directly benefit the community and everybody has a say. And with the committee being open to everybody to join, that allows that to happen versus tenant reps. We had a lot of issues with tenant reps. There's still issues with tenant reps or standing tenant reps or tenant leaders or whichever name that wants to be brought up. But there's still issues with that right now because the committee is not really joined, it's not introduced, so everybody still says, well, there's a tenant rep, or the old tenant rep still says there's a tenant rep until the committee actually officially puts their name out there. And people are always complaining to me, like, how is this possible? We didn't even have a vote for a tenant rep. So that's very why I'm really want the tenant committee to go forward, because especially with COVID-19, they could really help with issues like this. But I also think that each community needs its own start date. So we have to be very sensitive to the different issues in different communities. That way, it's like, for example, we're ready, but another seniors building may not be ready. They may have other things that they're going through, but September is coming for the townhouse, which is mostly families. They have to get out anyways to bring their children to school. So for us, we're ready to move forward. They've been asking, when are we starting to do things? And I definitely do think more information needs to be given because people don't understand that the committee is not exactly what they think it is. TCHC has its own agenda it wants to roll out, and it's not this group of people getting together to help the community. It's a group of people getting together to roll out TCHC's agenda to what pretty much TCHC wants. But our community has, sorry, pardon?
If you could just wrap up.
Yes, okay, yeah. I'm done.
Okay, thanks very much, Alicia. Are there any questions from committee members?
Yes, I do have a question, a couple of them. Alicia, are you contract managed or are you directly managed by TCHC?
Our community,
Yes.
I'm pretty sure it's directly managed by TCHC.
And there is the new organizational framework that's been set in place. Have you met the new staff that are to work with tenants and make a better experience? That's the whole reason why we reorged TCHC. Have you met them yet, or that's not happened yet in your community?
Well, at the safety meetings that we had last year, due to the murder that happened, there was somebody there but I don't think that he no longer is with this section. So the only person that we've ever met was Kathy. That's the only person that comes to the meetings. That's the only person we ever see.
And who's
we haven't met with new people yet.
Kathy.
Hoover.
Oh, okay. Someone for there. Okay. And you said we're ready. What if people aren't ready? Should we be looking at which communities have had great meetings, are really in place, are met in with the new reorg and press start, and then make sure that everybody has had a chance to have the best model possible? So you're ready to go?
Yes. I think that each community needs its own, maybe different start, because that's the only way that it's going to be fair. Because if you force people to start and they're not ready, you're going to get kickback. And if you don't start, people lose interest. People, here is a perfect example of when that happens.
Great. Thank you very much. Thanks for being on today.
Are there any further questions? Hearing no further questions, Dara, could you introduce the next deputant?
Yes, the next deputant is Ayan Yusuf.
Maya?
Yes.
Okay. Welcome.
Thank you very much. My name is Ayan Yusuf. I am a tenant representative many years in my community. My building is 190 Walnut Avenue. I'm a part of the O'Brien Unit E. The reason I wanted to talk to is I've been working with amazing staff many years in Toronto Community Housing. We accomplished so many things. And myself, I'm a social worker. I work with the community, and I invented so many programs, after school program, women program, seniors program, sewing machines program, science club program, and everything was amazing, and the community can benefit. One of my 3 youth in the building win $11,000 for a scholarship. I work with side by side. One of the things I'm kind of a little bit disappointed is the new system. It needs committee, which is fine. I wanted the committee to be mixed by seniors, youths, and adults, so that at least that combination can work together. But there's always one problem. When it conducting meeting and when people coming together as a committee, they have to discuss about the issue in the building, how can they improve the building, safety, cleaning, or whatever issue they're concerned about it. But sometimes if the meeting or the topic is out of the agenda or the topic is out of, we need somebody to have procedures to control or to respect each other and to look at everybody's opinion. It needs to be, some of the tenant has to be trained in order the way to conduct the meeting, the way to sit together, the way to respect each other's opinion and everything. But before this happened, epidemic, I started something called Tea and Talk in my building, and we used to have every 6 weeks one time, and we would talk about the issue in the building, and that's the way I was hoping that to create committee to take over. We still have, right now we have construction in my recreation room, and no one give the tenant notice or me or anybody else, so I can't tell what's going on until I email to the corporation and they let me know that there's a construction going and it's going to be finished next year. So there's so many issues involved when it comes in communication. The last great manager we have, it was amazing manager, was who left without notice, and now we don't know who we can communicate, who we can, if something they need tenant to communicate with it, who they can call, where they have to, talk about it, the issues or everything. So we have, my building is a mixed building, it's a family building with seniors, a lot of things. And seniors and tenant and stopping me in the lobby and asking me questions, and I said, I'm no longer in tenant hubs, but right now because of coronavirus and because the construction is going on, we were hoping after we come back, maybe we can start the communication open. Right now, I don't know who the manager is. I don't know who our community service coordinator is. There's a lot of issues. We cannot control of it, but it would be nice if the tenant has a way of open communication. And one of the things also I am so disappointed and I'm kind of a bit worried about it is the safety of Tchc tenant, because there's a lot of things going on. A lot of people are trespassing. And a lot of people, when they're called community safety unit doesn't want to come in the area and patrol because of the coronavirus. So what we need is a community development person or social worker who locally sit in the locally, deal with a tenant who has an issue, whether it's a mental health, whether it's a senior who's alone, whether it's someone family who desperately need help, so they can help them, sending them where the services are, and that person get that services. Because there's a lot of non-profit organizations who do community services, but nobody knows. And one of the things also I wanted is to bring job fair to the local area by youth when it come in the month of April, beginning of June, to make sure those kids prepare their resume, get a jobs, and at least they're busy instead of involved in wherever they're supposed to or wherever the around people coming in. And in order also to do way community and police, local police, I did create a program for last 5 years. I did make relationship between our local division and the mother in this building. So that's why there's a one shooting happened broad daylight in 121 Humber, and that case has been solved 48 hours because of the mothers brought a lot of tips, everybody in the meeting brought tips, and that's why that case has been closed for 48 hours. And that's the way it's supposed to be.
Ms. Youssef, can I ask you to wrap up?
Sure. So thank you for giving me opportunity. One of the things I wanted to emphasize is to make sure that and the other things, one of the things also I disappointed was every time we have a good staff who always we create relationship, we liked it, who always good for the community, disappear without even notice, Thank you for having me, and thank you for giving me opportunities. And I want, if this committee work, be effective and work hard and create so many programs for the communities. But thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Are there any questions from committee members? Hearing no questions. Thank you very much.
No, thank you. Have a good day, everyone.
And Derek, could you introduce the next deputant?
Yes, the next deputant is Laura Hammond.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. How are you?
Good morning, Laura.
Morning. So, as I mentioned, my name is Laura Hammond. I have been working in the Iron View community. That's at 1021 Birchmount Road. It is a Dell-managed building, and I started my community leadership in 2013 out of being engaged with TCHC's Youth Action Grant Program. We started a community council called Birchmount Community Action Council, and it's been a great privilege. There's been many, many challenges, and just to kind of jump right in terms of the tenant refresh and what we feel would be a significant support is, looking at every community independently, as the refresh does, but what is also existing in that community, not reinventing the wheel if something's working. So since we've started in 2013, we've held lots of events, we've run many programs, and not to be vague, but we literally went across the board because it was tenant-centered, in the sense where the first thing we would do is look at what programs and services community wanted. And a lot of that work, as other residents have said, has been very informal, in the sense where although we'd have meetings, a lot of those meetings could not be productive because the basic needs of some of the residents who were attending were not being met. And sometimes it would overpower the meeting because they strongly wanted their voices to be heard, whether it be regarding personal maintenance issues or their concerns for safety. So a lot of our work has been done in terms of consulting with the community in the laundry room, in the elevator, as we see each other in the parking lot. Like, it's been very informal over the phone, and a lot of the times, like, residents have different schedules, so having a set meeting time just isn't really conducive at times. So that being said, with the tenant refresh happening, we residents chose a community, a committee. And we already have the Birchmount Community Action Committee, which is an association, and we're not necessarily concerned about more residents being involved because that's what we want. We're a volunteer-led organization, and we call ourselves an organization that is a resident association because we do similar services as our community partners. And we partner with a lot of the community partners as well to run programs, whether it be our after-school STEM program, which many of our programs have been put on hold even prior to COVID due to hardship that we face in putting together our community hub. So we're still going through that process of getting our priorities put into the needs of our hub. And just to give you some background, we have received $500,000 through the POLE project and went to organize a community hub. We over-consulted the community and got a multi-purpose court and a hub. And similar to what Dahlia mentioned earlier, we knew that in order to get residents leading and really pursuing their passions, in order to mitigate some of the mental health issues that are in the community, that's the trauma from just living in a place that may be infested with cockroaches, which is the case at 1021 Birchmount. It being a Dell property, a Dell management property, oftentimes residents would be toggled back and forth to Dell and TCHC, and so we've had meetings with upper management who came directly to our building and informed residents how they can best follow the process. The problem is not many residents attended the meeting, so again, as residents, we went and spread that word out. Now, when residents feel like their voices are going unheard, a lot of the times they draw back. They don't want to be consulted any further. And for our hub case, we went as far as to get community partners to hire over 14 youth to consult on what they wanted to see in this community hub, because youth were a priority in terms of criminal activity that has been reported at the building. So we wanted to say, okay, what can we do to support these youth? And that being said, the engagement process at this point at 1021 Birchmount, a lot of people feel that the tenant rep system is not conducive. It's very difficult to put all that pressure on one person who may mean very well, but doesn't have the support to really look after the whole community, and oftentimes gets ostracized and blamed for things just by having that title. And in working collectively, we need to understand what that looks like. It's going to mean a lot of turnover. Residents who are low income most of the time do not want to just volunteer when they have their basic needs of, working to be met. So I think that in having that process of a building committee, it would be best to ensure that it allows for turnover or even re-entry from residents as they have to leave and look after other family responsibilities or other personal responsibilities that they may have. But lastly, also to Dahlia's point, I really like that she mentioned that it's important to look at who is in the community leading already. There's no need to reinvent the wheel when there's already a system of supports in the community led by residents who are actively doing things. And I think there needs to be more onus on supporting those residents while doing outreach to see who else is interested. Right, so because a lot of the weight does fall back on those same people who have committed themselves, as I have, and I have many barriers myself. But when you're passionate about doing this work and enjoy seeing the community benefit from it, you are going to be staying. Sorry, let me do a time check. How am I for time, guys? I don't know.
Yeah, if I could just get you to wrap up.
Okay. So that being said, I think. Definitely looking into how can resident leaders be either compensated or put into a network of support so that more action can be taken. A lot of meetings drain residents, and it's very important to tap into the support system that's already there doing the work.
Thank you very much, Laura. Are there any questions from committee members?
I just have a quick question. Which community was this person from? I just missed that part.
Sorry, who's speaking?
It was Uba.
Oh, hi, Uba.
Hi.
1021 Birchmount, I believe, Laura, correct?
Yeah. So I don't actually live there anymore due to a safety issue that unfortunately was very poorly managed. There was an individual with mental health issues, and as Dahlia mentioned, he was not removed from the community, but I did move, but I'm continuing my work. I'm still a TCHC resident, and I love the community that allowed me to do all this community engagement work, so I'm still there at 1021 Birchmount. We actually have a food bank today. So in terms of the COVID response, if I could quickly say, I think that it would be great to have a platform of support for this COVID emergency relief. We've thankfully tapped into support from community partners to do a weekly food distribution program. We're doing it outdoors, but our concern is as the weather gets colder, are we going to be able to maintain that? So we are looking for more direction from TCHC if we are going to be able to access the indoor space.
Thank you very much, Laura. Hearing no, you have a question?
Yes, I did. Who asked that last question?
Uba.
Oh, I didn't know it was on. Great, thank you. Two things. How do, I'm curious to know how you think communities should alert TCHC staff to issues around maintenance and safety. Works best.
Yeah, so I do think that for me, what I found was very impactful was taking a picture of my concern. So whether it be a mold issue, taking a picture and sending it in. Now, if there is, accessibility issues, maybe lack of internet or so forth, it would be great if we could just report it to Dell management. But unfortunately, if things don't get documented, what we've seen is that nothing actually happens. So the best way would be if we could call our local office and say we're having this issue and then receive some type of confirmation that, yes, This report has been captured, and we're going to follow through within X amount of time. Often it's just, we found out by having that meeting with the management team that it's best to call the Easy Track line and then to get the referral confirmation, and then to continue tracking up if we don't have any report back or we don't see any action within, I think it was like 2 or 3 days. So we've been sharing that with residents because I'm always hearing about maintenance issues. And so far, I think that is working. I haven't heard too much. We're also under construction right now, so there's been a whole host of issues that have happened. But so far, I think the Easy Track is working from what I'm hearing.
And can I ask one second question? Did you say that you'd got a grant or you'd secured a grant for building something? I missed that maybe.
Yes. So we applied for the Partnership Opportunity Legacy funding that the city was offering, and we were approved in 2015. The process has been an eye-opener, and honestly, even talking about it right now, I feel like I've talked about this process so much. It was very daunting. It was very demotivating in the sense where we thought we were following what was a best practice in consulting the community and even going out to get community partners to hire youth. So we really wanted to be informed by the priority group that we wanted to receive the benefits from the services. And even with that being done, the process was not only drawn out, but the lack of transparency was really demotivating, because here we thought we were in a partnership, and when it came time to just asking certain questions like how much do we have in the budget, even documenting like item by item what we'd like to have in the space, we were told certain things were out of scope. Like a 3D printer was out of scope. I quote, "You can replicate guns in those things." That's what I was told. And that, I had to like pull the phone away from my ear saying, did someone actually just say that we want to replicate guns in a 3D printer? So little things like that really take a shot at, your motivation when you're trying to do something that's going to benefit the community, because we have the vision, we have the lived experience as residents. We see the trauma. We see that the lack of after-school programming and youth hanging out in the hallway results in more fire alarms being pulled. We saw the benefit of having a youth outreach worker in our programs, talking to the youth, filling out resumes. We saw that gap could be bridged between the seniors and the youth, seniors who felt unsafe, through a gardening project. We were able to garden, and the youth were doing the heavy lifting and planting with the seniors, and it was great. But all of that on-the-ground grassroots work gets lost when it's assumed that either you don't have the intelligence or the capacity to continue supporting your community when you're on the ground.
Laura?
And I really don't, sorry.
2 things. One, did this, the money or the funds flow through TCHC, or was it through another vehicle?
No, it flowed through TCHC, yes.
And the second, you mentioned your group that you've initiated in the area. Is that only open to residents?
No, so we actually don't turn anyone away. It's priority for residents. So we ask, for example, say the food distribution program that we're running now, we ask residents to book in advance. So by Monday, they would just need to let us know if they're going to pick up on Tuesday. Otherwise, it's first come, first serve. If you reserve, we put it aside, but anyone from the community can come. Along with our community programs, it was priority for TCHC residents. If there were more spots available, anyone from the local community can come in.
And the last question is, that community is being managed by Dell. What would your comments be if the community was managed directly by TCHC?
Well, I find that I've been in different communities. So I've lived in housing, I think 30 years now. And what I've seen that when you're directly managed by GCHC, it's just a faster response time. Like there's been times where I've needed to have my my rent receipt, and it would be, so-and-so is not in this week, come back next week to get your rent receipt. And I was like, really? If we were at an OU office, then I could just get that printed out, and I know that from firsthand experience. Or being told that there would be certain supports. They don't. And the thing that's challenging is that Dell management doesn't really have a community mandate. Right now, the person that's there, she's been awesome at trying to work with resident services and us. But I just feel like it really depends. You have to have a superstar in Dell management who wants to go on and beyond what their contract is to do work that is much needed. I've seen similar issues as to what Dahlia said, where things got reported to them safety-wise, and they're aware about reoccurring issues of trap houses, if you could say, in certain apartments, and nothing happened until things were, brought to media or escalated above and outside of Dell management. So I don't know if it's because their hands are tied with their contract, but I do find it's a much faster response time when you're working with the OU.
Great, thank you very much. Are there any further questions? Hearing, thank you very much for your input, Laura. We appreciate it very much. And
thanks for your time.
If you could introduce the next deputant.
Hi. Yes, I'm here.
The next deputant is Valerie Sherman.
Yes, that's correct. Yep.
Go ahead.
Can you hear me? Hi, everybody.
We can hear you.
I'm from 4 Vendome Place, and I've been dealing with Dell management for a while. I was at 444 Lumsden prior to this as a tenant representative for 16 years at Lumsden. And when we were a tenant rep, I had a team. We were 2 tenant reps together, Janita Downey and myself. We found the group tenant repping was, I'm just going by issues when you talked in chronological order. The tenant rep team was a good idea. That's what we felt. But when one person is left to do this on their own, of course, it's very hard. But we found dealing with the 2 tenant reps, we found it great. And the communication, we opened up a resource center beside the Dell office, and they felt that it really took off a lot of pressure off of them because we dealt with some of the residents prior to them having the issues brought to them at the Dell office. I even helped the Dell office arrange their desks so that they felt more safe. And so we had a lot of safety issues that we dealt with, and a lot of tenant concerns on the resident level that we brought to the table for the residents, and we found it very easy. Now, this is my take on it as a tenant representative, and also prior to this 16 years ago, we were trained as tenant representatives. We all went through courses. We took many courses of being a tenant rep and learned the TCHC ways, and we were bound by, we had to sign an agreement as a tenant rep, so we had to work for the residents, but we were also looking out with TCHC as well. And we dealt with budgeting and bringing new items into the building. So now that I went over to work with Dell in the Lumsden area, Vendome area, is totally different. Very large community spread out on many townhouses, and I find that there's a real disconnect there. Tenants don't know whether they're coming and going. They can't talk to the staff there because the staff are in real fear, and I totally understand. So I've been taking a lot of questions for the residents by myself because I've had some experience at Lumsden, and I've really taken care of a lot of the problems on my own. But I think it's a good thing if you could have 2 or 3 reps in an area. That's just my take on it. But they have to be trained. There has to be a training component to teach a tenant rep how to be a tenant rep. That's my take to bring to the table. On the other hand, dealing with Dell management, I find that when you have an issue, if you verbalize it with them, but when it comes to you finalized on paper, it's totally different. So I don't know, like right now, if you go with a rent dispute, then you have to take it to TCHC. But if you take it to Dell, they don't have the same outcome that TCHC would have. So there's a real disconnect there, I find. So I just find, and I've gone to other Dell offices to ask them questions, and they run things totally different at their office. They're very open and communicative with the residents. So it's only at our Dell office that we have some issues, and they come to me and discuss this. And I told them, you know, I help them out as to a degree that I can help them out. But I've helped a lot of the problems with Dell privately, and we've resolved them. So I thought there's something here to deal with this. And everything's calmed down a lot more when I found that I've been doing this. I just wanted to test it, and it seems to be working. I just wanted to know your views on that.
Okay, thank you very much. Valerie, are there questions from committee members?
Yes. What's the committee members? Are you from all over the Toronto area?
And then you take, there's the Woodbine exit to the, and then you just go up and then to the right.
Oh, that's what we're doing directions here. I didn't hear you. I just hear somebody talking in their car.
Close off there.
Thanks, Kareem. I owe you, man.
This is stay where we are.
Yeah.
Around to the left on Adelaide. Straight on to
is everybody from different communities? Like what communities are we talking to?
Well, we're hearing representatives from TCHC from any of the TCH communities that would like to have input into the refresh of the tenant engagement system. Board members are from all over the city.
Great. Okay, well that's mainly my take on my community. Now, I know every community is a little different. Every model is a little different, but that's what I find in my community. I've been in Vendome for 2 years now, and they're doing a lot of construction. They're doing a lot of great things, but I think they need a little more help in that office there. That's what I feel.
Okay, so I'm going to ask committee members if they have any questions for you, Valerie. Are there any questions from committee members?
No questions.
No, I'm fine, thank you. Thanks, Valerie. Nice to see you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much for your input, Valerie. Deb, if you want to introduce our next deputant.
Yeah, we had scheduled 8 deputations. One of the deputants, Latoya Mitchell, wasn't available. So Ms. Sherman is actually our last deputant. I would note for the record that those individuals who had submitted deputants in the same way that we would for written submissions through the video were Treshna Williams, Leslie Oduro, Nicola Bino, Leon Carpenter, Rick Parsons, Mustafa El Haddad, Kadeen Bankasingh, Mohammed Hadi, Mohammed Ali Aiden, and Kwame Anani Frimpong. And the committee members have the video we sent to you yesterday by Sonia Fung. So with that, we can,
I just asked if anyone just needs a quick break before we get back to the presentation. It's a good time. If they don't, that's fine.
We can then move to the presentation from Ms. Penny unless members of the committee need a quick break.
Mr. Chair, we have one more deputant. We could take the deputant, and then that would be a proper time to have a break, I would suggest.
I don't think we have that last deputant isn't available, I believe, Colin.
One person wasn't available, and then we're going for another person. Oh, fine then. Good time for a break.
Should we take 5?
5 minutes, that's great.
Okay.
Question, I didn't see the videos. I didn't see the email from Sonia in my, maybe it got put into my spam.
What time was it sent last night?
So
I have the one that came at 7, I think it was 7:10 p.m.
And included, as I understand it, included in that video or in that email, there is a link to the video. It's embedded as an email address within the email that you, or a web address embedded in the email that you received from Sonia. It's the last bullet in the email.
How about if you resend it?
Okay, I didn't realize that the Co-Join Institute, is that what you're talking about?
Sorry, I'll resend it to all committee members.
I'm doing it right now.
Kevin's doing it right now.
Okay, thanks. And we'll take a 5-minute break.
Turn off their microphones, please.
And knowing, you know, how to image or build an image.
I would do the same thing.
Yeah.
I would delve into it,
Yeah.
be deep, neck deep.
Yeah.
And learn as much as I could.
Yeah.
About it. Right. So pushing drivers. I would dive into that knee deep. Yeah.
I think that's what we should all learn, right?
So I mean, you will all get the same opportunity. To learn the same information. How you absorb, how you consume that is up to you, right? But in terms of core responsibility.
see how we mobilize our resources and collaborate together and bring our community forward. And
Hello, are we ready to restart the committee?
I'm just eager and excited to get everything going post-COVID, all the programs that
Are we reconnected? Can you hear me, Kevin? I've lost sound.
For you, Brian.
Okay, now I can hear you.
For anybody else, maybe everybody who's on, we can see who's on here.
Maybe they're on mute.
Everybody's on mute. Everybody's on mute except for Sheila Penny and Kevin Marshman aren't on. They're not on.
I see Kevin.
On.
They're
Their mics are not on. Kevin Marshman, Sheila Penny.
Yeah.
Sarah's muted. No, we're.
Okay. Can you hear us now?
I can hear you, Dara.
Okay. Sorry. When we went on break, we muted everybody, and so it just took us a minute to figure out which audio feed we were using in the conference room.
Okay.
So we're all back now. I think I saw Mr. Campbell, Brian, and I think I heard Councillor Fletcher, so we have quorum. And I think we've got the presentation lined up for Ms. Penny.
Great. So Sheila, if you would like to start your presentation, that would be great.
Thank you, Brian. So by my count, we had 18 written deputations, we have 10 video submissions, and we just heard 7 audio presentations for a total of 35 deputations on a single report in front of the committee today, and to me that demonstrates that this is an issue that tenants are keenly interested in and one that we need to pay very special attention to. So thank you for this opportunity, calling the Special Governance Committee to be able to consider the tenant engagement system refresh. So we have a long history with tenant engagement. The company is founded on it. Today, I'll walk you through some significant milestones in that history. I'll then move to the original mandate and methodology for the citywide Tenant Staff Engagement Advisory Committee that was formed in 2016 to consider the issue of tenant engagement. I'll then talk to you about how tenants participated in 2018 to design the system in response to 52 recommendations that were adopted by the Tenant Services Committee. I'll then move to how tenants continue to participate through 2019 up to today, and then close with how the system is designed to work and how it will realign with restructuring. So starting with the background, the key milestones, tenant engagement in our company actually has its history in our shareholder direction. Approved by City Council in 2001, our shareholder direction requires our company to maintain a democratic system of tenant participation, to provide a tenant council structure or something similar, to provide for tenant input for decisions at the corporate and local level, tenant input in setting local priorities and service levels, and it requires us to include tenant representation at board. In 2015, TCH initiated a review of the tenant engagement system. The Mayor's Task Force, which reported out in 2015, also recommended a strengthened system. The Citywide Tenant Staff Engagement Advisory Committee was formed in 2016 and reported out to the Tenant Services Committee in 2017 with 52 recommendations focused on governance, accountability, information, communications, tenant participation, and capacity building. The corporate response to those 52 recommendations was considered by the Tenant Services Committee in April of 2018. There were updates provided in November of 2018, January of 2019, and on March 29th, the Tenant Services Committee approved each community choosing one of 4 models for representation. In May, the Tenant Services Committee approved the tenant engagement system structure, and in July of last year, the board approved the new tenant engagement system structure. In October, given the pending federal election, Tenant Services Committee approved an extension of the time frame from Q3 to Q4 in 2020. We also, at that same time, federal election, we were going through a restructuring. We started work on the restructuring, and with our CSCs for engagement and communities, we began planning an election that was to happen in April. COVID hit in March, and that planned portfolio-wide election was put on hold. And in June of this year, we presented an update on the system to the board with some suggestions for how to move forward in a COVID environment to confirm governance. And that takes us to our presentation today. Next slide. I'll just spend a few minutes on what the mandate was of that citywide group that was formed in 2016. It was to be diverse, inclusive, collaborative, with the goal of increasing tenant participation in local decision-making. The values that it operated through and with: respect, equity, informative, inclusive, and collaborative. Next slide. The methodology that the committee and tenants worked through to build that engagement refresh system began in buildings and with community meetings where all tenants were invited to come together to brainstorm on what the local priorities were in that community. We understand that all communities are not the same, that there are differences that need to be considered. Those priorities were then in those communities through lobby and community intercepts prioritized by community. Tenants were surveyed on their preferred engagement model. There were community forums held to consider the work of the citywide group, regional consultation forums. Tenants were consulted on the development of the tenant volunteer policy that would be a complement to the new engagement system, and based on the consultation results, regional forums were held. So that is work that transpired in 2018 after the 52 recommendations were presented by the citywide group. Next slide. So the roadmap in 2018 looks something like this. Community meetings were held to understand what local priorities were. Those priorities were prioritized locally within the community through a dot-mocracy exercise, lobby intercepts, community intercepts. There was a survey on which model tenants wanted to move forward with. The tenant volunteer policy consultations occurred in parallel to the work on the engagement system itself. There were a series of community consultation forums and community feedback forums. So all in all, in 2018, 16,631 tenants were involved in the design responding to the citywide 52 recommendations. Next slide. Moving to 2019 and through to today, there are 3 significant actions that were undertaken that are ongoing, some that were paused in response to COVID that we need to pick up again. There have been a series of just over 6,500 tenants involved in local community action planning meetings. We initiated, prior to COVID, open call sessions, information sessions, the first point of engagement for the selection of tenant leaders, either through the tenant rep system or the building committee system. We still have 36% of our communities to reach out to. Next slide. And the third piece of work that has been going on, initially agreed to in March, over the balance of 2019 into 2020, the selection by each community of their local engagement model. So communities have come together and voted on either the building committee model, the community representative, tenant rep model, tenant association, or we have a small number of communities, 3, who decided that they did not want to be involved in TCHC engagement. So all in all, just under 10,000 tenants participated. You can see the participation rates in the chart on the right. The regional participation rate averaged out at just over 20%. And you will note the orange shaded section of the circle that the gray shaded section of the circle, we still have 25 communities that we need to get out to and work with them to select their engagement model for governance. So the deputants that you just heard spoke about communities that are in different stages. That is absolutely accurate, and we have to tailor the outreach to each community as we go forward to adjust to the stage that they're at. The next slide, please. So the improved engagement system operates at 3 levels: the building or townhouse level, where tenants come together in a committee form or with their tenant rep at a building level, works at a community level with representatives selected from the building committees to sit at a community table, a broader table, tenant reps to sit at that table. So we have buildings actively engaged, communities actively engaged, and once we move through the selection of tenant leadership at the community level, we'll then move through a selection process to establish a citywide level of engagement for tenants. Next slide, please. So as I spoke about earlier, in September of 2019, the Board of Directors approved restructuring, the establishment of tenant service hubs across the system that are generally structured around 300-400 units. So in terms of aligning the restructuring with the engagement system, this diagram sets it out. So we have buildings who meet regularly, either with their committee. So any tenant in a building or townhouse community can attend a committee. Any tenant in a building with the tenant rep system can attend a meeting with the tenant rep. Those buildings and townhouses roll up to the hub level. The hubs roll up into a regional tenant community action table, and the regional tenant community action tables will roll up into a citywide tenant staff governance oversight committee. And the last slide lays out how we will engage with tenants at every level. So at the building townhouse level, as I said, community reps will come together with their building or townhouse committees. Tenant reps will come together with tenants in buildings. They will review ongoing building issues, monitor the implementation of the local community action plan. And these plans, I've reviewed several of them, deal with very local issues that tenants can be engaged in. The building townhouse groups roll up into hubs. The hubs are key for us in that it's through the tenant service hub and the reps elected to sit at those tables that local resources will be leveraged to support engagement activities, and also that we will receive building by building, hub by hub, tenants' feedback on the quality of service that we're providing so that we can respond locally to address service issues. At the regional level, the elected, selected representatives from the building townhouse level will sit with the GMs and other staff to problem solve regional tenant identified priorities. And at the city level, there'll be a citywide application process where each tenant community action table has representation. And at that citywide table, we will look at issues that impact the entire portfolio. So with that, that's my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions, and I would encourage us to move the process forward to the next stage, to have us go out into each community, level set where that community is at, and establish a solid tenant leadership forum that we can consult with at every level in the company. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sheila. And now I'll open it to questions from committee members. Questions?
I don't know, Brian, I have some questions now.
Okay. Paula?
I just wondered, now you've got this citywide level of tenant engagement in order. I'm not sure how that works with the tenant directors. What are the differences there? What's the expectation of tenant directors versus the citywide group?
I can't tell you, Councillor, how many times I've wanted at a portfolio-wide level to have an advisory group that we could reach out to test ideas with that impact the portfolio, to consult with tenants, to get their feedback, get their input. So it's something that we're very much looking forward to at a regional level for the general managers, but also at a citywide level for myself and other members of the ELT. So it is an advisory group to come together with senior staff and present issues, concerns that tenants have so that we can respond through committee and the board.
Have you discussed that? I know you're concerned about the shareholder. I see that in the report. Have you discussed this particular piece with the shareholder, because we have tenant directors and now we're setting up a tenant advisory portfolio wide? Have you had that discussion with the tenant first staff at the City of Toronto?
So I believe, Councillor, that is something that we should take away to make sure that there is no conflict with the mandate for board members and citywide. We have had some initial discussions with the tenant first group in the city, but we could bring something back through the Tenant Services Committee to board that makes it clear what the mandates are.
Well, it might be through the governance committee because we are dealing with the shareholder direction. And have you had that conversation about what kind of voting are we having? Online voting with the staff at Tenants First? I understand you haven't had that conversation yet.
With the staff and the Tenants First Committee, online voting?
Yes, the method that you're proposing now because of COVID.
So we will have two models to select tenant leaders in committee, because the committees are relatively small. We're hoping to be able to host WebEx or Zoom forums for tenants that have formed those committees so that they can select their tenant leadership. And for the 83 communities that have elected to have tenant representatives elected, we're exploring some technology to allow for online voting. If we can't make that work, it's more challenging than we initially thought. We will host 83 building meetings with social distancing and allow for in-person voting.
So I know that we have the new model, and I'm wondering, which is our new reorg model, which is to deliver services locally and engage tenants in a new way for clean buildings, safe buildings, all the issues that we've heard about today from so many great deputations. I'm going to go over my time, Mr. Chair, because I have quite a few questions here. But would you agree with me that not all communities are at the same place as far as the richness of their current tenant engagement? so that there might be a committee, but it might not really have been robustly set up, or it hasn't been set up in conjunction with the community, with the community service coordinators for GCHC. So that I guess what I'm asking is there'll be different communities at different stages. Would you agree with?
That's absolutely correct. There are different communities at different stages, and we will be reaching out to each community through their community services coordinator for engagement. So if the community services coordinators did not set up all these tenant meetings, did they? Because they weren't in place. So the CSCs for engagement do organize meetings.
They weren't. I want to be clear in my question, Ms. Penny, that the community service coordinators in each community were not yet in place when all of the community meetings were held. That's my understanding.
So we had community services coordinators for engagement in place prior to the restructuring, and those individuals are still in place. So they've been out in community over the years that we've been working on the engagement refresh, consulting with communities. They're now aligned with the tenant service hubs.
And so what was the role of the revitalization group in setting up these meetings?
So the revitalization team would not be setting up meetings relative to governance in tenant engagement.
Sorry, there's a big truck outside and I can't hear you. You have to.
Okay, sorry.
Just over again.
So the revitalization team is not part of the CSC team for engagement on tenant participation across the portfolio. The Revite team has a mandate that's specific to revitalization in their community.
So have they set up all the meetings for the revitalization, for these tenant groups in revitalization?
The CSCs for engagement will be setting up those meetings.
Did the revitalization team set up the tenant engagement meetings in revitalization communities? Question. Or was it the CSC?
I'll have to confirm that, Councillor.
Okay. And in discussions with the shareholder, because you've mentioned that so many times, and it's great to have that acknowledged, Toronto Community Housing, about the shareholder and the shareholder's strong desire to have tenant engagement, that was there engagement, or was there an advice taken from the shareholder about letting the tenant reps go, which were let go at the end of 19 or somewhere in 2019. So communities have not had any elected representation at all. Was that step taken in conjunction with the shareholder and the advice sought on eliminating those existing tenant reps?
So, Councillor, I did not participate in those discussions if they occurred, and I would have to loop back with staff to answer that.
Who would have participated in those discussions?
The tenant services team that was in place at the time. But I can loop back and provide information prior to board about the tenants first team in the governance model.
Is that because of the reorg and some of these people are no longer in place?
Councillor, I have to go back and look through files. I don't want to make comments that aren't accurate.
So now I'm very interested in who was leading this. And who had relations with the Tenants First, or the Tenants First group at the city?
Okay, we'll report back on that.
Yeah, you can report that to the board. That would be fine. Going to ask for a couple of things to come back to the board. And just in the management models that you heard about, the contract manage, I know that nothing surprised you when you heard about that. What's your goal as management in all of the contracts buildings right now to have for the tenant committees? Do you have a goal there in contract management that might be different in directly managed buildings?
So we've taken one significant step with the contract managed portfolio. We've aligned the contract managed buildings with the regions. So our contract managers collect the rent, manage arrears, deal with maintenance, coordinate capital. But the other side of the business that we provide through our access and support CSCs for engagement, our CSCs for access and support and engagement, safety, security, that other side of the service that our company provides is now aligned with the region. So the contract managed buildings, east, west, and central, receive the direct managed services for maintenance, cleaning, rent collection, arrears, vacancy filling, but they are just starting to receive direct support from the company for engagement, for access and support, for safety and security. And we are also working with our contract managed providers to establish hubs, tenant service hubs that will be open to tenants during the same hours that the hubs will be open in the direct managed portfolio, so they'll be able to go in and access services directly. So it is a work in progress, but the tenants in our contract managed portfolio are TCHC tenants, just like in our direct managed portfolio, and we have to get the right checks and balances in place to be able to improve service.
Thank you. I may have others, or people may, I don't want to dominate all the questions.
And Brian, I've got a couple of questions.
Yes, John, go ahead.
So Sheila, I'm on slide 8 about the local engagement model selection. And it says there, 2019, 2020, 18,484 tenants engaged through various activities during the process. But in the pie chart, it says 9,980 tenants participated.
So I'm sorry, if you look at slide 7,
okay,
and you add the 6552 and the 1952 and the 9,980, it's the total of those 3 activities.
I see. Okay.
Community action planning, the open call, and sorry for that confusion. That is
okay.
Not
now,
clear.
So, as I recall, tenant associations are treated differently than community representatives or the building townhouse committees. Is that correct? They're somehow outside the system.
Yeah, those communities have elected to have a tenant association.
So what's the difference between an association and a building or townhouse committee?
So a building and townhouse committee is tenants can come to the table, can consider issues, concerns supported by staff, identify priorities.
Right, right.
Tenant associations it's a different form of governance.
So can one building be a tenant association?
It can. And
all right,
we actually have several long-standing associations within the company.
So are they treated differently in terms of how we engage them?
So they manage their own engagement. We connect with them through the CSCs for engagement to allocate portfolio-wide resources like participatory budget, tenant funds.
In those buildings, they basically decided that in terms of engaging the community, they're going to be controlling the process.
Correct.
So how do we know that those associations are representative of the will of the people that live in those buildings?
The tenants that live in those buildings have to elect to form an association.
Right, and how often is that renewed?
I'd have to confirm that, John.
Because I'm just wondering. So let's say let's say there's a tenant association in a building with 300 residents. It's a long-standing association. It's controlled by, 4 or 5 people, but most people are not really engaged with it, and ergo, it could be that just a few people are really running the show, and people are not really being engaged at all.
So these 25 communities, the tenants in those communities have elected to remain as an association. So we went out and canvassed tenants in those buildings through door knocking and lobby intercepts.
Okay, and then how do we gauge whether or not we're really satisfied with, well, I guess we have no choice, right? I mean, if that's what they've decided, that's what they've decided. I'm just wondering if some people are sort of excluded because of the power and the long-standing tradition of an association when maybe, for example, one of the deputies said that where there's a community representative, where there's a tenant rep, sometimes people don't want to go to that person because of sometimes there's cultural problems, sometimes there's just personality problems, they don't feel comfortable talking to the person, so they feel excluded from the process. And I would suspect that there may be instances where tenant associations are in place and the same thing occurs, where you've got a group of people who form the association and others don't feel like they're part of the process. Do we have any way of understanding that or measuring that?
So like I said, we did go out through this local engagement model selection process and canvass those buildings, and it was only, it was confirmed fairly recently. To my memory, I don't know if we have had a deputation at committee or board from a tenant association tenant who is concerned about the service that they're getting through that association, but it is something we could take away.
Just curiosity. Okay, that's fine, Sheila. Thank you. And I guess in terms of this participation that's taken place, I gather that how much interaction has there been with these communities since the onset of COVID-19? Has it been drastically reduced? Is there still some engagement? What would just be your comment on that?
So since COVID, it's been drastically increased in some areas and decreased in other areas. So decreased in community events where people come together, but increased in staff reaching out, making calls, doing door knocks, delivering food, making sure that tenants have their day-to-day needs met. So lots of engagement, but shifted in focus. And now we believe we're at a point where we can bring it back to move to the next stage in tenant selection for leadership, either committee or tenant rep model, to get that.
Okay, Brian, those are my questions. Yeah. Thank you, Sheila.
Okay.
Uba, do you have any questions?
No, thanks.
I have a few questions, Sheila. One is, what are the KSIs on a go-forward basis? Because obviously, from a board perspective, we would want to know that the system is working effectively going forward. And I guess I'm trying to figure out what what are the measures, the key success indicators to measure tenant engagement? And is there an easy way to have that information, reported to the board on an annual basis or on whatever basis makes sense?
So as we've talked about a little bit at the board table, we've developed service quality indicators in cleaning, maintenance, tenancy management, community safety, and support. We have had staff respond in each of those areas with the service that they believe they're providing to community, and our next step in that really critical process at a hub level, at a granular level, 300 to 400 units, once we have tenant leadership in place, is to hub by hub work through that service quality indicator and hear directly from tenants in those hubs what quality of service they're receiving in each area, including tenant community and support, which would include engagement. We've also developed profiles for each hub that capture at a high level who is living in the hub, what services they presently receive, and it's our goal as soon as we can get things back moving to, again, be out in community, refresh that information, get the service quality indicators working, and move the company forward.
So I realize all those items will be in place and they're important, but I guess, and I don't expect you to respond immediately, but to think through how, as John was saying, we got tenant associations, we've got committees, that we know that there is significant involvement of tenants at each of our sites and within the hubs. So maybe just think forward on ways to know that we're not, these groups aren't being dominated by a small group, that we've got significant engagement in those communities, so that we feel very comfortable that's what's coming forward through these vehicles. They are as representative as possible of the concerns and issues of each community. So if there's some way looking forward as you're going forward to figure out how we can get an indicator of tenant involvement, I guess is my question. So
Brian, if I can respond to that, maybe what I would say, given that we are following a democratic process here, that in the same way that council is reaffirmed or changed on a 4-year cycle, perhaps we look at we'll take away a thought as to how we can reconfirm the appropriateness of the model, on a cycle perhaps every 4 years.
Yeah. Okay. Good. I again didn't expect an answer, but something to think about. I guess I have another question. Is the relationship between and this came up, I think, earlier, relationship between the tenant board members and the wide. Is there any thought on the relationship between those the two groups to ensure that there's continuity and consistency, and we're not setting up one group to be fighting another group. So how relationship between the two, has that been thought through?
Well, I think let me take a first stab at that. The tenant directors, if you're talking about the board directors, are selected by the city, and the engagement model is intended to be, and it's only 2 tenant directors that we have, and certainly, you know, the kind of level of involvement they can have being two individuals is substantially less on an issue-by-issue basis than the local community. And so I would say that the tenant, you know, rep model and the tenant, you know, and the tenant associations model and building level committee models, Brian, are really meant to represent and bring forward a greater focus on local issues. And so I think the tenant directors serve a governance role that is different than the, you know, the engagement model that we're talking here about, you know, which is really geared to, you know, greater local feedback, you know, on an individual by individual basis, because we've acknowledged that one size doesn't fit all. And so in that same vein, having each of the hubs communicate, you know, the specific needs of the hubs, you know, in their area and their focus, I think, is important and different than what the board directors do.
I just wondered, you know, just whether they should be part of the tenant community action table, the citywide process. Anyways, just something to think about. Just
we can discuss it with them.
Yeah.
I'd love to get Amanda and Uva's thoughts on that. And one other question, whether there is a way, as you're trying to reach out and ensure as many people working under the conditions of COVID-19, whether there's some letter voting process where tenants, you know, I'm not sure whether it's mail in, but certainly could drop it off in the local office, what their preference is to ensure that everyone has the best chance to vote in these processes. So it's just another thing to think about, Sheila.
Okay.
As you work through this process, because not everybody has technology, and maybe if there's voting by unit, each unit could get a voting envelope, and if they wish to vote, then could drop it off in a space in their building.
Good stuff.
Anyway, if there are no further questions, I'd like to put forward the motion. It's
Brian, I have.
Is that Paula?
Dara, I sent you some motions and Brian some motions.
Okay.
Why don't you have a look at those? Sorry, it's so hard online.
Yeah.
Sorry, Councillor, I've got your motion. I can share it with the committee.
Thank you. There's two. Are they there?
I think I've got them up. You should be able to see them in the WebEx. I've shared the document. I've characterized it as directions to management to take steps.
Yes, but to report to the board, I'm sorry, it's very clear. Back to the board when this comes forward.
So
I can't read that, Dara.
Sorry.
Can you read it, Dara?
So let me try and pull it all up. So everything all together would be that it is recommended that GCHRC receive the information and report for its information and forward it to the board along with the following information. And some of this I took from the questions to staff. Whether TCHC Revite staff scheduled tenant engagement meetings in communities who are subject to revitalization, and not, if not, who did so. Confirmation whether TCHC staff consulted with Tenants First staff in relation to the decision to permit prior tenant representation to lapse and the decision to initiate virtual voting in order to facilitate the tenant engagement process. And then provide direction to management to forward this report to the shareholder to request advice on proceeding with online elections for the refreshed tenant engagement model and report to the board meeting, and that any other advice that the shareholder may wish to give on the proposed tenant engagement model. And finally, based on the chart provided in the report, the COO recommended to Board of Directors which communities listed are ready to proceed as sufficient tenant involvement, internet access, and inclusion have all been met.
That's, I didn't make number, I can't get back. I didn't do number A, but you've put that in there, and that's, that wasn't mine. It must be somebody else's.
Well, it was in the original.
But that's fine.
Is that correct, Sarah?
That I did not make that one.
Sorry, I understood that was a question that was asked during the course of this meeting, to which committee members wanted to have that information at the board meeting when this matter was considered. But if that's not necessary, I can delete that one and we can simply proceed with the remainder of the motion.
Yeah, I have the two what I call big ones. That isn't that, but that can go in as certainly not A, but because the first two really are the critical ones. If that's a piece that, sorry, that you want to put in there, that's fine, but not.
I'm just trying to.
Not as number A.
So Paula, the way the motion is written right now with the 1A, 1B, sorry, 1A, 2A, and 2B, is that, does that reflect the desires of the directors?
So I'm going to speak to that, Mr. CEO, since I'm making these motions. If that, I'll ask the chair if that's okay.
Sure, go ahead, Paula.
Thank you. I realize that this corporation has been through significant upheaval. And first of all, I want to thank all the deputants that came today, the ones who wrote in, and those who took time to do a video. I did have another question. Video. It's a new way to do things, and I think it's great to hear directly in that way. But we do need to recognize the amount of upheaval this corporation has been through. So when we start looking at the initial refresh, I think it was 2015, that was many CEOs ago, lots of COOs ago, lots of. So as well, I realized that we have a new org model, which I think is fantastic because it's really based on good communities, clean communities, well-maintained housing, safe communities, the things that tenants have told us over and over and over and over again. So that's a kind of a really anchor model for housing. It's about management of the portfolio. It's not just, we're leaving our sexy revitalization is what we're focused on we're focused on our tenants, how well they're doing, and ensuring that we're having a tough management model that tenants are able to live a good life in clean and well-maintained and safe communities. So I really appreciate the new model and the direction and the focus on it. I also want to say that our new model didn't come about just sitting by ourselves. It's come about through the focus of the city administration and city council, the shareholder that were on TCH stepping up with its core mandate, core function, which is to serve low-income tenants in the city of Toronto, provide good housing. And that there are those, the Tenants First model that was set up, the Mayor's Task Force was in direct requirement that TCHC was perhaps not filling the mandate that shareholder had asked. So in this and these motions that I'm making, I don't want to hold this up, but I do think that we need to be a bit cautious in how we're proceeding. And Brian, you asked a few questions about voting and can people paper vote and all those kinds of things. So it's my understanding that, and I would like to know the level of engagement of the Tenants First team in this, simply because That's why the city set up Tenants First. It's called Tenants First because the shareholder is concerned about the tenants in the properties that the corporation manages. So really, I think it's important to me to know that we have advice on this manner of voting under COVID. We are in an extreme circumstance. We're still in lockdown. We don't know what's going to happen. So it just makes sense that we're now moving to something new. I would like to make sure we have that advice to the board. And the second thing is, I would like to make sure that, and one of the tenants who deputed today said it so well. She said, some communities are just ready to go and others aren't. And the report, because it's so comprehensive, and I do thank you very much for that level of that level of report being so comprehensive, that just it looks like everybody's ready to go. So I think it would be helpful where we look and using the new model, there's the new hub in place, there's the CSCs are in place, everyone's there. We can look and see that in some communities there was a huge turnout, and perhaps it's in great shape to proceed based on whatever advice we're going to get from the Tenants First team. Then I think we should ask what that phasing would look like, starting with the first set that are ready to go, that are based on sufficient tenant engagement, because some of them aren't obviously ready to go, some internet access issues, and was there, I want to call them inclusion targets, but was there real inclusivity in the committee that may have been set up? And is there real an approach that is clear if there's a lot of languages, what that looks like, so that we really set a model up to start. And I think with that, I'm happy to proceed. And I would, number 3 is just, Dara put that in there. Thanks, Dara, for not reading my mind, but that part about I think you took it out now. Oh. Anyway, about who set all the meetings up. And so I think you took it out, but I think you could put that back in just in case. Now that I'm seeing that, and
so Dara, could you just read the motion again so that we all are clear? I'm looking at it on my smartphone, which is very small print. So,
the motion would.
Actually, no, I'm sorry. This is not what I wrote, Dara. I want this report forwarded to the shareholder.
Sorry, Councillor. I think I've addressed that in 2A.
Okay, hang on. Well, isn't that what you're getting back?
The language in 2A and 2B is, I believe, taken directly from the email that you provided, and I've simply characterized it as the committee providing direction to management to take those steps. I can reword it so that the committee is directing the report itself. It just seemed to me to make sense to characterize that as directions to management.
Well, I see 2 things here, Dara. Receive the report and forward it to the board for its information along with the following information. A, confirmation, and provide direction to management. No, I want that reported to the board. That was clear in my motion. I want us to hear your provide direction to management. I'm sorry, it's so hard to see this on the screen. I apologize.
Sorry.
It's tough to work like this.
So are you saying, Paula, that you're wanting the shareholder to directly respond to the board?
I'm saying that, and I can't get page 2 up now, Dara. Provide direction to management to forward the report to the shareholder to request advice on proceeding, and based on the data, recommend to the board of directors which communities. So that would come there. And then I would like the management to report what the shareholder said, and I'm not sure that's clear. Our committee can't send it to the shareholder, but obviously management would send that to the shareholder. Now I can't get page 1 up. Could you display the whole thing for me, please?
Councillor, sure. Councillor, I'm just trying to add the last element that you've added as part of paragraph 2, that, as I understand it, you're looking for management following their having forwarded the report to the shareholder to report to the board on the shareholder's comments with respect to this matter.
And report to the board on obviously a list of, in other words, we're just going to look and see who's ready to go. So we can, if we decide to proceed, then we're ready to proceed. But I think from today and looking at the report, I think a phased approach may work. If Ms. Penny comes back and says every single community is ready to go, that might be a different discussion. But I think we should tee this up in a way that is implemented as smoothly as possible and as robustly as possible. So I think that's probably okay that those reports are coming to the board.
Yeah, okay.
Sorry.
No, that's good, Paula. It's always a challenge electronically when we're not in the room.
Well, and this is one of the reasons why I want to make sure that in our excitement to do that, that we have those, that we've got the best advice. And I'll just finish by saying, I do think this is one of those moments where we want to make sure we're in lockstep with Tenants First. The amount of time, energy that the city staff put in working with TCHC and as the shareholder looking at TCHC and as the service manager for TCHC, that I want to make sure that in this very major piece that we are getting the best advice, that and that they're fully cognizant of everything going on. The shareholder put the shareholder's direction. I'm also interested in their opinion on how the tenant directors are, what their role is as far as the shareholder is concerned vis-a-vis a citywide advisory and what their relationship might be. I will just say from my many years on the board that there have been times when management, not this management necessarily, but management has disregarded the tenant director's opinions or overlooked them or not treated them as important as everybody else's. And I think that those days need to be behind us. And I do think that there's times when one might seek advice from tenant directors on how to approach certain things. And I'm not sure that is going on. When I was on the board under David Miller, it was the first time that a tenant actually chaired the Tenant Services Committee, that they had been not allowed to chair committees until that time. If you can imagine, the tenant board directors were not allowed to chair committees. And that started then. At the moment, case, but I just want to say thank you for this report. It's been through many doodles, but so has TCHC. So everybody needs to take a breath. We are still in our tail end of our upheaval, and let's make this as smooth, as professional, as thoughtful, and as one person said today, as meshed with our new org model as possible. And that would be one of the criteria that would be there for which communities are ready to have their vote, would be, are they robust? Are they set up? Is the CSC in place? Can that person drive that? Because that's the whole reason we're doing this. So to have something proceed without the first piece, which is being able to work with those tenants, having a robust community model on the ground in communities, then I don't want to do this again. I want to do this once. And given
Mr. Chair, I got a question of the mover of the motion.
Yeah.
Yes.
Could you explain to me, please, B, based on the chart provided in the report, the COO recommend to the board of directors which communities listed are ready to proceed as sufficient tenant involvement, internet access, and inclusion have been well met. Can you explain what you're looking for there?
Well, in the chart that we have, it lists every single community, how many people came out to those community meetings, how many positions will be filled. Some of them are pending, very low turnout. Some of them had what I'll call a robust turnout, like 136 people were engaged somehow. So I'm basically suggesting, I'd like to hear from the COO. In the tenant engagement model, assuming we're going to have online voting, here's 50 communities that I think are ready to go. There's been sufficient tenant involvement. There's enough internet access or voting options that would be successful. And there's enough inclusion. And by that, I mean that there is a good balance of racial inclusion from all the different tenants that live in there, that there may be language barriers to voting that have to be overcome, that can be easily overcome or not, that those things be identified. So if you have large
information that I drew from, I guess it's slide 8, shows the local engagement model, is that there's still 22 communities that have yet to be appropriately engaged.
That's correct. So, and when I look at that, John, I also see a number of that may have been engaged, but perhaps the CSC will say, well, that wasn't very deep, or that's still just a select group of people, or how did they miss all of these people that have been so active already? And here's a number of properties or communities that it's been exemplary, they're ready to roll. So instead of saying we're going to roll out this project, every single community, my approach, and I'm hearing your concern, which is some communities aren't even there, that we looking forward to more of a phased rollout, which would start with the top tier. And what would the top tier communities be to begin?
Okay. All right, I got it. Okay, that's good.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right. Just, Brian, did you want to, and if there are no more questions, did you want to take the vote on these motions?
Yes, but if Derek could just read it through once, just to make sure everybody's fully installed.
Yeah.
And then we'll take the motion.
And I welcome any comments if it needs improvement. It's recommended that the Governance Committee receive the information and report GCHRC 2020-18 for its information and forward it to the board for its information along with the following. Confirmation whether TCHC staff consulted with Tenants First staff in relation to the decision to permit prior tenant representation to lapse and the decision to initiate virtual voting in order to facilitate the tenant engagement process. Provide direction to management. Forward this report to the shareholder to request advice on proceeding with online elections for the refreshed tenant engagement model and report to the board meeting and any other advice that the shareholder may wish to give on the proposed tenant engagement model. Based on the chart provided in the report, the COO recommended to board of directors which communities listed are ready to proceed as sufficient tenant involvement, internet access, and inclusion have been met. Report to the board on the shareholders' comments with respect to this matter.
Thanks very much, Derek. Will you move that, Paula?
Yes, I did have the other one that Dara's taken off, which is any of the Revite communities, but I think that COO can just let me know that in private. We don't have to have that as formal motion. So yes, I'm happy to move that.
Okay, and Uba or John, would you second it?
I'll second.
Thanks, John.
Yeah.
All those in favor, I think we can do it by the raising of hand.
No. Vote.
Sorry, Councillor Fletcher I don't see your camera. Can I have your vote?
But she moved, shows she has to vote. You can't move and vote again.
I see the chair. I see Mr. Campbell. Ms. Farah?
Yes.
Okay. The motion passes unanimously.
Sorry, is that a recorded vote, Dara?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, we'll record that.
Dara. I know it's hard for you, Kevin. You're lucky. Was that considered a recorded vote, Mr. Board Secretary?
Yes, we'll record. Yes, we will consider that a recorded vote.
Oh, thank you very much.
If there is no other business, I'll look for a motion to adjourn and close the meeting.
Motion to adjourn.
Thanks, John. Uba, you second that?
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. It was an important session because this is an important area, and thank you for participating.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.